When he was caught in this fib in December 2005, Bush remarkably said that, quote, in fact, that the fact that we're discussing this program is helping the enemy, unquote. Now, Alberto Gonzales defended this program in February of last year with some odd reasoning. Bush, he claimed, had this, and Joseph Stromberg talked about this kind of rationale, but Bush said that he had this power inherently since he was the commander-in-chief. The Constitution and Congress's post-9/11 authorization for the use of force granted Bush all the power he sought. Indeed, even George Washington, said Gonzales in a funny slip-up, even George Washington conducted electronic surveillance. But, all of this defies reason. Why are they so quick to defend all these laws that empower the president if the president already had the powers? If the Patriot Act changed nothing, why was it necessary? In January of this year, Gonzales said the NSA spying is now being done with the approval of FISA. So either the warrantless spying wasn't as necessary as they claimed, or perhaps the FISA oversight is more of a rubber stamp now. But is their attempt to work with FISA an admission that they were violating the law before? I don't know. I think what they're really doing is warming us up for totalitarianism. Thus, do they refuse to outlaw torture completely, even though they claim they never practice it? Thus, do they say the president has had all these powers since the Washington administration, but they never relent in asking for more powers? Thus, do they cross their fingers and tell us that they're doing things the old-fashioned way? Then they say that everything's changed on 9/11. We can't do things the old-fashioned way. Even discussing this is pro-terrorist. This is all Orwellian nonsense. It's to make us used to living in a world run by an absurdist total state. And if this surveillance state's not absurd, what is? The FBI has issued over 140,000 national security letters forcing people to reveal information to the feds and forbidding them from talking about it to anyone. I've heard, there have been some changes lately, but who knows what's going on. The FBI admitted in August 2005 to secretly conducting thousands of files, or collecting thousands of files from groups like the ACLU and the Catholic Worker Movement. They have no fly lists. They have databases to keep track of dangerous groups like the anti-war Quakers in Florida. Now, liberals need to remember all this if the next administration is Democratic. Because, Franklin Roosevelt didn't shy away from compiling information on right-wingers and radical leftists. Throughout the Cold War, both parties engaged in surveillance of peaceful activists. Now, matters are, of course, much worse regarding detentions. The rule of law here has just been turned on its head and then decapitated. With the Military Commissions Act, Americans can be declared enemy combatants. They say that the habeas corpus only applies to non-citizens, and maybe for a while I don't understand how this is supposed to work, because what if they say you're not a citizen and you don't have a hearing? I mean, habeas corpus, if it doesn't apply to some people, it doesn't apply, it seems to me, right? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, so I probably don't understand all this. Now, the principle of innocent until proven guilty has lost almost all support, especially on the right. How else can we explain when an innocent or a peaceful, unarmed guy was killed in the Miami airport runway? Almost every conservative online said, well, yeah, that's what, this is the paragon of national security. This is great, And it's funny because conservatives used to, some of them at least used to say you should be able to bring a gun on a plane, or it should at least be up to the airline. It's like they don't understand the Second Amendment's point. The reason that the Anti-Federalists wanted a Second Amendment is because they didn't trust the government. Now, things are working so fast. They passed the Military Commissions Act. The same day or week, they changed posse comitatus. Now, posse comitatus has been beaten back in the past, but now it looks like the administration can order up the National Guard to do whatever, in case of, I think it says something like emergencies or other stuff, very vague language. And this is discomforting because if you looked at, this is something that was ignored pretty much. If you looked at the way the government treated people in Katrina, Americans in Katrina, rounding up weapons, putting people in detention centers or whatever you want to call them, it was not good. And I think the post 9/11 fog of hysteria helped them get away with this brutality and torture. Now, if there's anything that's gotten really bad, it's this widespread support for torture. During the GOP debate that we saw, that many of us saw in South Carolina, only Rand Paul and John McCain took a stand against it. But McCain, as far as I know, has never said the CIA shouldn't torture. But when most of the Republicans, their answers, they just tripped over themselves to sound like they're more pro-torture. Double Guantanamo, get Jack Bauer in here, and the Republicans love that, and it's not good. I mean, if you're pro-torture and pro-war, it doesn't matter if you want to subsidize abortion or round up guns or expand the government or jail entrepreneurs. They'll like you. Oh wait, I forgot. I'm talking about that guy who's the mayor of. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting. I shouldn't defame him. Now, so the torture thing's really upsetting because the torture chambers were one of the big reasons to invade Iraq. Now it's a talking point for getting votes. There's been progress, though. There's mention of communities standing up against the Patriot Act, communities standing up against the Real ID Act. There's some things that aren't as bad as they used to be. We don't have the outright censorship in World War I, where if you just said the draft is slavery, they might put you in prison. Of course, the draft is a form of slavery. And we don't have the draft. But, John Edwards and a lot of people on the left, they're for slavery. They say we should have a draft, but they put it in, civic duty. But the left and right might unite one day, especially if there's another terror attack. We don't have, Japanese internment. And right after, Arab internment or Muslim internment, but right after 9/11, a surprising number of Americans, not as many as supported Japanese internment, but a surprising number of Americans, according to some polls, as many as 1/3 at one point would support this idea. And we have all of the institutional mechanisms in place for something like this, and a little shift in ideology, another terror attack, something as bad like this could happen. They already deprived habeas corpus of, right after 9/11, rounded up hundreds of people, as I think Jim Bovard mentioned. And of course, we have people actively defending internment in retrospect. Michelle Malkin had this book, Defending Internment. I don't want to put words in her mouth. The book was actually called In Defense of Internment. But she made a lot of points. I don't have time to address some of her points, but I'll just mention one because it's very important. She points out, virtually every major country from Japan to Germany, from China to Egypt, from Holland to New Zealand interned its enemy aliens, end quote, during World War II. So, that's a good argument because, if the Nazis are doing it, then we shouldn't get too upset if our government's doing it, but that's kind of the standard when you're fighting a regime that the government claims is like evil embodied. Now, we all know that you can't have small government and free markets in war. We know that most of what we have now, big government, came from the wars, even more than the New Deal or the Progressive Era, even the Department of Agriculture and the New Deal itself, as Bob Higgs points out, it's very important, grew out of World War I. And just the Iraq War has cost, it's hard to, the estimates are all over the place, but I've seen, $600 billion so far, or looks like it's going to be soon, which is $2,000 per American. Yeah. And, so I want to say it's good that Americans want to pull out of Iraq and Afghanistan. Wait, what am I saying? It's good that Americans eventually want to pull out of Iraq, but we have to, the U.S. needs to pull out of Afghanistan. This democratic idea, U.S. troops should leave Iraq, go to Afghanistan where the real war is. It's obscene. The U.S. needs to pull out of Iraq, Afghanistan, the Middle East, Japan, Germany, Korea. Latin America should stop meddling in elections. We should end foreign aid. We should close down this disgusting empire of 140 countries, or 140 bases in over 140 countries. Sorry, I slipped up. I'm an American. I think all those countries belong to us.